No. Oh, I This guy went on this one. Yeah, there's a map.
I know.
Next slide. Yeah, we definitely. Push out.
Yeah.
I brought another.
Get some blood right?
They like your project.
Yeah, I just read,
Well, because
That's right. Your expenses are more up here.
All right, everybody, I got 7 o'clock on a couple of clocks, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. We can all rise to the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Roll caller.
yes, I am.
Oh,
Jimmy Melky,
Here.
Nancy Rondell. Here. Matt McGarrett,
here.
Michael Behrman,
Here.
Kathy Macho.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Very good. Citizens comment. If you're here to speak to us about something that's not on the agenda, this is your opportunity.
You don't mind? Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Lerstein. I am the current undersheriff here in Emmett County. I work under Pete Wallen, and I'm not sure if all of you are aware of it yet or not, but Pete is retiring at the end of this term here. And as such, he has endorsed me to run for sheriff, which I am doing. I wanted to stop in tonight, introduce myself, let you know that I plan to make it to future meetings. Want to make myself available to everybody. If you have questions, comments, concerns, or just want to talk about my candidacy or what I stand for, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I brought my campaign manager with me tonight. We're gonna have our website up and moving here pretty soon. We have our social medias up already, and those are already, I have a lot of my information out there. So that's all I really have, and I won't take up too much more of your time. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Anybody? No? Kyle?
Really quick, Matt's a really good guy, he helped me when I. And, just the March 18th meeting, I apologize in advance, I'm not gonna be here for the March 18th meeting. I have another commitment downstate, but I will have an officer here in my presence and my absence. And then also, just so you know, Officer Dan Steele is now through his FTO. He finished up last week, so he's now on his own, so he'll be out and about, and you'll see him. The other night when he was here with Spencer, it was because he still had to be side by side with Spencer, but he is now, we've cut the umbilical cord, and he's now on his own.
What else? What online?
Remind everyone on Zoom that in order to speak, you have to raise your Zoom hand and we will unmute you. As well as a public comments limited to 3 minutes. And please state your name and your address before you speak.
Doesn't look like we have any public comment, any more public comment? Consent agenda, everyone get a chance to review?
Yeah.
Comment?
I think it was-
Complaints?
It's fine, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's fine. I'll make a motion that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Do the roll call. Kathy Macho,
Yes.
Matt McGarrett,
Yes.
Jamie Melky,
Yes.
Nancy Rondell,
Yes.
and Michael Behrman.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, item 3A, this is selection of the Bluff Stability Committee members. Council remembers back in January, we formed the Bluff Stability Committee as a means to facilitate discussions between property owners on the bluff and on Third Street to discuss best practices regarding bluff management, especially related to vegetation management in order to ensure the bluff stability. So at that January council meeting, it was suggested by President Linda Rockowitz that we form the committee, and council agreed with that decision. It would be, led by the residents, property owners, and they would come to council with any recommendations that come out of that discussion. We had appointed the mayor and DPW director Lucas Vanderzee to be on that committee, and then the other 6 members were going to be 3 from Bluff Drive and 3 from Third Street. And I think we had a good turnout. I had probably about, I think we had 11 or so people who applied to be on it. I had a couple other people who called that were interested as well. But they decided since there was already so many people on it, they didn't want to put their names in the hat. But we do have about 5 on Third Street. We have one who lives on Main Street, but represents someone who lives on Third Street. And then we do have 5 from Bluff Drive. So I think at this meeting, it's really up to council to appoint those members, and then the committee will get together to determine a date and time to have their first meeting, and then they'll report once they're done, once they have their findings, they'll report back to council. I don't know how long that will take, but let the process play out.
So in the past, stuff like this, everyone puts in their nominees, and whoever gets the most votes gets to be on the board.
We want to ask if there's anybody that's on this list that's here, if they'd like to introduce themselves.
Yeah, is anyone on the list that's here? Well, Linda's always in. You only got one in the bit.
I'm Linda Rockwitz. I live at 519 East Third Street. And I suggested this committee because things have gotten very contentious between the residents on Bluff and on Third Street. And I'm hoping that we can find consensus on best practices for trimming and protecting the bluff.
I'm your new neighbor. I'm Debbie Taggart, and I just moved to 361 East Third Street recently, and I'm very interested in protecting that bluff because I feel like it's entering my bedroom daily. And best practice, same as you. Yep, so I'm here and want to get involved with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Is that fine?
Yeah, I think we've done that before.
Right.
Okay.
So is there any other public comment on the bluff stability? Any last minute volunteers? Who wants to go first? Michael?
Sure. It was a pleasure reading all the applications, and it's one of those where you truly feel that, oh, why can't everybody be on it? But there's got to be some limits. I just want to preface it. So it was a hard decision, but ultimately my nominees from Third Street would be Bill Brown, Gretchen LaMarche, and Linda Rockwitz. And then from Bluff Drive, excuse me, Peggy Aboud, Robert Brown, and Daniel Mullins.
Okay.
It was very nice to see so many applications. It's really great. I always look for our voters when I look at lists like this, so that I'm aware of who our voters are on these lists. So for Bluff, I had Peggy Aboud, Gail Stevens, and Robert Brown. And for Third Street, I had Gretchen LaMarche, Linda Rockwitz, and Deborah Taggart.
I'm sorry, what was the last?
Deborah Taggart.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
You, Janet?
For Third Street, Gretchen LaMarche, Linda Rockwitz, and Debbie Taggart, and then for Bluff, Peggy Aboud, Dan Mullins, and Gail Stevens.
Oh,
You ready?
it's my turn.
Yeah.
Okay. for Bluff, Peggy Aboud, Robert Brown and Gail Stevens. This was hard, because there were a lot of really excellent candidates. Third Street, Linda Rackwitz, Debbie Taggart and Bill Brown.
Good. See, my Third Street people would be Linda Rackwitz, Gretchen LaMarche, and Debbie Taggart. And then up on the bluff, we'll go with Peggy Aboud, Gail Stevens, and Dan Mullins.
Okay.
Okay, so looks like we have, for Third Street, Linda with 5. Then we have, Gretchen with 4, and also 2, 3, 4 for Debbie. So it would be Gretchen, Linda, and Debbie for, Third Street.
If they're coming to the meeting.
Peggy's has 5 for Bluff. Gail has 4. Dan has 2, 3. And Robert has also 3. So Peggy and Gail, yes, but then Robert and, let me just double check. 2, 3, 3 for Dan, and 2, 3 for Robert. Yeah.
3.
They can't move 2, 3, 4, 5. It's only 5 of us. Only 5 of us, so. I think Brown had 2 and Mullins had 3.
Brown only had,
Because there's only 5 of us.
Right.
So Brown had 2 and Mullins had 3. Pretty sure.
well, so that's 5 for Peggy, 4 for Gail is 9, plus 3 for Dan is 12, plus 3 for, that adds up to 15, so yeah, that's,
Okay.
yeah. So Robert and Dan, you both had 3.
Now what do we do?
Okay.
Run off.
Well, now you know, now you guys choose between
It
you.
goes into overtime.
Goes over, yeah.
So we were appointing 6, correct?
Right.
3 and 3.
But we've got a tie.
We got a tie for third place, yeah.
Robert Brown and Dan Mullins.
Robert Brown's a voter.
Yeah.
Mullins is not.
Let's see.
I'll go with Mr. Brown. Just. Well, sorry, yeah.
I'm Mr. Brown.
Brown, 2 for Brown. You know, I actually, they were both choices of mine, and I'm comfortable with Mr. Brown.
All right, so then we have Peggy Aboud, Robert Brown and Gail Stevens from Bluff Drive, and Debbie Taggart, Linda Rockwitz, and Gretchen LaMarche from Third Street. So we'll be in touch. Thank you for applying to be on the committee. We'll be in touch with scheduling a date and time for our first kickoff meeting. Appreciate it. The next topic is a Parks and Recreation annual update. So Parks Director Rachel Roon will give an update on Parks operations.
Dan is gonna
Oh, Dan.
introduce the presentation. Okay.
Okay.
Dana Mulder, I'm the chairperson of Parks and Recreation Board. For those that don't know me, and this is Rachel Roon, who is our staff Parks and Rec Director. And we are excited to be here and give you a report on our second full year as a board and what we've got planned for next year. We started out making some good improvements in our process and also continuing to refine our guidelines on our vision and how we make decisions. So Rachel's gonna tell you a little bit about what we did last year.
Perfect. As Dana said, I'm Rachel Roon. I'm your local Parks Director for the City of Harbor. So in 2023, we worked with Topo Nexus and we brought the Passport to Adventure to town. It has our parks properties listed. The kids can visit them, get stickers. Once they get all their stickers, they bring it to City Hall and they get a free water bottle. Kind of fun, shows visitors where the public restrooms are, a very simple layout. We completed fundraising and opened the western section of the boardwalk, also the donor plaque is up at the boardwalk. If you've not seen it, please go check it out. It's beautiful, thanks to Pro Image. And designed and rolled out, I already said the password, so look at there. We completed and opened the new skate park. There was about 20 people there when I left work today at 4:30, so very popular. We finalized and ordered the Zorn Beach Playground with partnership from the Advocates for Zorn Park. Thank you to them for their kind donation. That will be installed in April. And then we began planning the Kiwanis Park improvements. We submitted a DNR grant request. Unfortunately, we did not get that request, but we do have an avenue for some donors to still complete a large project up there. More great things. We partnered with the Top of Michigan Trails Council and Harbor Inc. to begin fundraising for the Harborway to come through the spillway for a safer route for bicyclists for M119. We held sledding and s'mores events when there was snow. We're gonna hold the Easter egg hunt again this year. We hosted Fall Fest. And Fall Fest was a big deal because it was our first rain cancellation. That was fun. So we had it the following weekend and we still had about 300 people there, even with not so great weather. We partnered with the Harbor Springs Tree Board for Arbor Day celebration, and we worked with the DDA for 2024 Ice Fest, handing out hot dogs, chips for free, and we did the scavenger hunt.
200 hot dogs this year.
200 hot dogs, yeah, it's impressive. We partnered with Harbor Yoga Alley to hold community yoga classes at Shea Park. It started with like 6 people, and by the end, it was like 60. You couldn't even see the grass. It was crazy. We made trail improvements and added benches to the Kiwanis disc golf course. And we began publishing bi-monthly Parks Corner articles in the Harbor Light newspaper. So our big 2024 projects. So we are gonna complete the skate park, which will be landscaping, a fence on the south side. We're gonna monitor operations there as it gets busy in the summer season. And then put some plaza area site furniture. We do have a potential donor lined up for that project as well. So that'll happen early this year, or this spring, sorry. Again, complete the city beach playground. We're also gonna get a new railing along Wallstrom's for safety purposes and continue fundraising for the eastern section of the boardwalk and also continue fundraising for the Harborway. And then I'm gonna pass it over to Deanna Mulder for the rest of the presentation. This is where she comes in.
All right. One of the big things we're doing this year are surveys. So the first one we're gonna do is trying to get at who is using our parks between Harbor Springs and all of the townships. And there seems to be some willingness to have the townships help out just a little bit more. We've made some great improvements to the park. And the last one was negotiated in 1980 or something like that. So that'll be the first one. Then we'll do another one this summer to get a feel for how the community feels about some of the big projects that are swirling around out there before we undertake them. We also just formed a programming committee to look at ideas for recreation programs in Harbor Springs. And that could be things like fitness in the park, sports clinics that would be put on by the high school student athletes, maybe having an open gym night kind of thing. And we have an absolutely fantastic student rep this year, Sophia Summers, and she has a mass of people that she brings to all things. So we're very lucky. Let's see, and then we're also going to finish up the design and come up with a phasing plan for Kiwanis. I think that was one of the big challenges the first time we submitted it. It was a big project. So I think we're going to try and split that into some logical phases and hopefully be able to move forward on some of that. Things that we're looking at are improvements to the building, desperately needed. Parking improvements, we would love to do a skating rink there. This winter has been challenging, so we're thinking if we do it at all, it would have to be probably with chillers. And then an ADA accessible walking path. We're also looking at some more disc golf improvements. Let's see, Harborview Park is up at the corner of Hoyt and 119, and we just cleared out the middle of it, got some old brush out of there. And it has so much potential. So it's used by, for picnicking by Little League teams, when they're up there playing. People from Bay Bluffs, take walks over there all the time. So we're hoping to just do something simple, maybe a walking trail. And then we're gonna look into, whether people are interested in maybe having a picnic pavilion there, that you could rent out, or, the teams could rent out. Let's see, Rachel, do you want to talk about the update of Kiwanis Park that's already underway? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if you go up to Pleasant Park this week, the sand is gonna be removed. There's gonna be a hole. So DPW is removing the sand from that playground and the older equipment, and we are gonna use the used playground equipment and put it up there. It's 10.
From the beach.
Yeah, from the beach. So it was originally there. It's 10 years newer. Then we're gonna paint the swing so everything looks brand new. And then the wood chips that we had ordered for the beach are also gonna go up there, so nothing was wasted from any project. So 2 playground updates.
Yep. One really exciting thing is Rachel met with Andy Shepherd at Emmett County DPW to talk about recycling. And it looks like, well, we've applied for a grant to get recycling containers in all of the parks. So that's something we've gotten feedback on for a while. So that's a great thing. We're also going to look at what we can do to really get creative on funding, because we don't have a very big city budget. So we learned a lot on the DNR grants that we submitted. And so we'll have a real eye towards how can we get higher scores. That's how you get the grants. What are foundations with links to Northern Michigan? And as I mentioned, working with the townships to complete an updated cost sharing agreement. Okay. And I talked about the guiding principles. So we've updated these both the 2 years that we've been in effect now. This being our third, I guess, yeah. So keeping a focus on quality over quantity and getting our projects done and done well before we start new ones. Keeping it simple, often less development is better. Flexibility is important. We have so many big events in the parks, so we don't need a bunch of hardscape that would get in the way. Our town is small. We don't need to check every possible amenity on the list. We maybe don't need a splash pad, or I don't know what else. So, and then from our surveys, we found that people really value family-oriented spaces, amenities, and then programming and events. So we'll continue to focus on that. We did learn that it's very important to come up with alternatives and pros and cons when we're looking at big projects. Just do our due diligence. And we like the idea of trialing concepts wherever we can. And then residents want to know what Parks is doing, and they want to have a voice. So look forward to that, hopefully. And just a quick review of why parks are important. Mental health, this is where we go to relax, and it's a setting where you can interact with other people. It provides a setting for community events, and it's a major factor in perception of quality of life in the community. And it's a source of pride and cohesion. Environmental, it provides green space, buffer from the urban environment, and a place for children and families to connect with nature. Wildlife corridors, it moderates local climate, cleans air, filters stormwater. And parks are found to improve property values and attract new residents and businesses and boost the local economy through the attraction of visitors. And we thank you very much. And we're happy to entertain any questions, or if you want to get through everything else, we'll do it at the end, understand that too.
Public comment about the parks, suggestions? One at the table.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Great.
Okay, item 3C is redevelopment ready communities updated and marketing plan. So for this meeting, we were going to bring the marketing plan as part of the RRC process. It's one of the best practices that we've been working on. And since there's been a lot of conversation about the redevelopment ready communities and what it is and some questions about it, talked with the mayor and we decided to do an update on it at the same time as going through the marketing plan. We attached a marketing plan in there. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It really boils down to having two goals. One is to promote our assets, community events, or services to current and potential members, visitors, and local businesses. The second goal is to provide outlets of clear and effective communication to encourage more engagement from community members and local businesses on city projects and policies. So two goals, two simple, straightforward goals with several action task items you've probably seen in there. The plan lists local and regional partners, lists our assets, our community assets, and our marketing assets, and then it talks about, shows our branding elements with our logo and the color schematics. So it's a pretty straightforward plan. Rachel put it together, so I appreciate it, but we did review it at the RRC committee meeting for input from all the members there, and I think it's simple, straightforward, but it works. So I would probably want to do the presentation on the RRC first, and then council can decide whether or not they want to discuss the marketing plan and vote on it. Switch to a presentation here. All right. So what is the RRC? This is a statewide certification program that does a few things. One, it aims to build fair and consistent development processes. When you go to see Jeff Grimm, zoning administrator, to have a project, whether it's on your home or on a commercial property, he directs that person to the right process, whether it's through the zoning office or the planning commission. And the goal is to make those processes straightforward, clear, and consistent. Next is to explore and implement community and economic development best practices, which we'll get into later. Create well-defined procedures and a predictable development review process, and attract appropriate investment for specific sites in the community. The Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which is an autonomous and quasi-governmental agency under the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. They're the ones who set this up. It's their marketing arm and their head advocate for business development, job awareness and creation, and community development and focusing on the growing Michigan's economy. It also reports to the Michigan Strategic Fund when it's going to disperse funds for projects to communities that want funds from the state. And that was established by Governor Rick Snyder in 2012, again, to promote economic development in the state. MEDC certified its first RRC communities under Governor Snyder in 2014. So I think there was three communities in mid-2014 that first got their certification there. And of course, it's a quasi-governmental agency, so some of its employees are state employees and some of them are non-state employees. So they have a breakdown on their website on how different employees report to different people based on their functions. And as Governor Snyder was implementing this, one of the things he noted, and I'll just read this quote, he was talking to Michigan legislature in 2011 about the need for economic and community development. Neighborhoods, cities, and regions are awakening to the importance of place in economic development. They're planning for a future that recognizes the critical importance of quality of life to attract talent, entrepreneurship, and encouraging local businesses. Economic development and community development are two sides of the same coin. Community without place amenities will have a difficult time attracting and retaining talented workers and entrepreneurs or being attracted to business. So really this RRC and the placemaking under this guise was all part of an economic development strategy by the state to attract business and retain business that we have in the early 2010s. A lot of people rightfully so, get a little concerned with the word redevelopment and development. And a lot of the images that people think of is overdevelopment. That's, big buildings, someone coming to the city and tearing things down and putting new stuff up. But in the planning and zoning world, development is much more simpler than that. It really means a change of use or an addition or expansion of structure on a property. So for example, a dilapidated house is removed and then rebuilt. That's redevelopment. A vacant commercial building is renovated. That's redevelopment. A property owner changes the use of his downtown site from an office space to a restaurant. That's a type of redevelopment, development. So it's not, a lot of people have an idea of, development being, big buildings, or new neighborhoods coming in, but it's really not that. It's literally, it can be looking at a specific site and pulling out a permit or getting a planning commission approval to do something different or new on that site. Per state law, the master plan is the city's guide for land use development and physical development. The planning commission must, according to state law, plan for future growth and economic and social and physical development, and also make recommendations about redevelopment. So that is the planning commission's purview. So that when they're working on a master plan, when they're working on zoning ordinances, that is within their purview and something they must do according to state law. And so the city must have zoning that regulates development. Thus, from the master plan, which they focus on development and redevelopment, how to use that physical space and how to look at land use, comes the zoning ordinance. So just to summarize there, it's our responsibility and a requirement to plan and prepare for development and redevelopment. It's the best practice to be as proactive as possible in preparing for this development and targeting that development how we see best. And I think that's really crucial, is you don't want to end up in a situation where you have developers coming in and they basically have free range. You want to be able to target and kind of manage that development. And this is part of the RRC process, is helping give you the tools to, or you implement your tools or create your tools to manage and direct that development. It's a constant reality. Development and redevelopment is always happening in every town, sites all around town. It's happening every day. So, Jeff, every time someone gets a permit, as it's considered development or redevelopment when they're adding something or switching uses. So I think, as I mentioned, we should, as a city, control and direct the development in a manner that best serves the community. So the RRC, it's not just for distressed or rundown communities. It's also not just for big cities. There's probably about 70 communities or so that are RRC certified, and probably another dozen or more that are essentials. There's just a list there, Charlevoix, Petoskey, Traverse City, Marquette, Grand Rapids, South Haven, Hillsdale, Novi, Rochester Hills, Alpena. So you have a variety of cities, sizes, and locations throughout the state. There are about 200 other communities engaged in the process. So this is just an example. If you go to the MEDC website, what they do. So for example, this is Boyne City, who's also RRC certified. They're looking to attract someone to go into this building. Right now, this building is used as an attractive space. They right here used for home decor and gift shop, but it has room on the second floor to add another business there. And so, part of the RRC process, MEDC is, helping them market this spot because they want to have a specific business come in there. Another example is here in Grand Haven, they have this, what they call a neighborhood commercial node. It's a prominent piece in their town. There are business commercial occupants there, and they want to be able to attract someone to be able to do a rehab on the historic building. So again, this is where they solicit funds and people from the MEDC to come in here and hopefully attract the right person that can rehab this building as part of their redevelopment. So really, that's for some of these smaller towns, that really is what redevelopment and development means is taking these sites, these buildings that were, once great community assets, but maybe have kind of, have become vacant or not at their best use, or the best use that the planning commission or the city views as their best use. And so they want to target specific development to come in those buildings. So why are we involved? Originally, the DDA came to the city council to, and we'll get into this, but to request the city to engage it because it avails ourselves to the MEDC grant. So the MEDC, I think in the early to mid 2010s, they used to have grant funding available to any community. Sometime around 2016 or 2017, they said, You know, we're not just gonna give MEDC grant money to any community. We're gonna give the grant money to communities that show that they have the tools and the assets available to attract the right kind of development. So they were gonna start putting criteria on how they develop, how they give out this money. And so the DDA, you know, in 2019, well, yeah, first in 2017, thought about it and discussed it, and then 2019, they made an official ask to city council for the city to be involved. So when we got involved, there was basically two other reasons in addition to potentially receiving MEDC money. One was to be proactive instead of reactive. There was an idea that, you know, it's better to prepare now for economic downturns rather than to scramble in the future to figure out what to do after there's some sort of downturn or recession. It's also better to plan for development before it's proposed than figure out how to respond to it when it comes here. So that was one reason. The other and one of the big benefits that we've seen here is to make our government processes and procedures more transparent, fair, and consistent. And we've done a lot of improvements here at the city with that, as we'll get into later. But that's been a big part of this for us. Without, you know, having this kind of guideline checklist, we probably would have not run through all these different processes and procedures to make our procedures better and processes here. So the timeline, as I said, in May 6th, 2019, the DDA requests council engage in the program to be eligible for MEDC grant monies. Later that month, we give an overview of the RRC program, and council adopts a resolution engaging in the process. Then COVID happened in March 2020, and we essentially stopped the process because couldn't have in-person meetings. There were other things going on, so we didn't re-engage the process until December of 2021. So there's a good 20 months or so there where the city didn't do anything with the RRC. So then we re-engaged, and the MEDC staff delivered an RRC baseline report to the city. And that RRC baseline report, which is on our website, we've posted it back when we got the baseline report, a lot of that was through the creation of a self-evaluation about city staff, you know, and, you know, so it's a baseline report that, you know, they did a quick run through our zoning code, our practices, our website, our plan, our downtown plan, and all those things, and saw, you know, to what extent we remediate certain best practices, but they combined that with a self-evaluation from staff. City council then reviews the baseline report and recommitted the city to engage in the RRC process back in February of 2022. In March 2022, that's when we approved the public participation plan as part of the RRC process. In June, we adopted rules of order for city council, which we've never had as part of the RRC process. We gave another update to council in August of 2022 about RRC. And then again, in February of 2023, we approved the boards and commissions handbook as part of the RRC process. In April of 2023, we did a board's recruitment and expectations policy. And then in May of 2023, about 10 months or so into our zoning code update, council accepted a $25,000 grant for MEDC to help pay for the zoning code update. They saw that we were already committed to the RRC process and that we were already going to pay for the zoning code update. So council determined that, you know, it makes sense to get some state funds to pay for the zoning update. The best practices, there's about 30 best practices for certification, and this can be sometimes a little confusing because there's all different best practices handbooks out there. It changes every couple of years. They kind of change a little bit, tweak whatever some of the best practices. Transportation, for example, used to be a bigger part of the best practices, but they realized that transportation is not something that's consistent across different size cities, right? Some cities have, you know, larger transportation networks, others don't. So they kind of scaled back on transportation requirements, for example. So they kind of change in a couple of years, but they're pretty much relatively consistent with some of the core best practices. So here I've outlined which best practices, and the green shows what we're fully aligned with currently. Yellow is what we're partially aligned with, and red is what we're not aligned with. If you see a little star denoted, that just means that we had that in place before engaging the RRC back in 2019. So when we first engaged, we had the master plan and the downtown core plan. We didn't have a capital improvements plan, which is a state law requirement. So it was good that we got on that because you're required to have a capital improvements plan. It's a 6-year plan that looks out to the future for your big, large scale expenditure projects. Then we create a public participation plan. So we're all done with the planning part of the best practices. These are things that have to be updated and reviewed annually. well, not updated, but at least reviewed annually. So there's some ongoing tasks that you're always gonna have to do, but that's just good practice, best practice anyway, to review your plans to make sure you're following. You know, we do that at the tree board, they do it at the parks board. They look at, and at the planning commission as well, they look at their implementation matrix and they see, you know, we have all these goals. Are we on track to meet these goals? Or do we need to tweak these goals, or do we put these goals to the side? So that's just best practice. With zoning, the 6 main topics, best practices were aligning the zoning code with the master plan, making sure the zoning code is accessible and user-friendly. There's concentrated development in downtown and housing diversity options, which we'll get into a little bit more in depth later in the presentation. Parking flexibility and green infrastructure. For the development review process, and this again is the meat of, you know, this and the boards and commissions are really the meat of the best practices here, where they talk about those processes and those procedures that we need to have in place. So this just make things more consistent and fair and transparent. So there's a lot under the development review process. You know, some of them were simple, that we had a defined development process, a point of contact. Jeff Graham is a zoning administrator and planning coordinator. He's the point of contact. Having conceptual review meetings, an internal review process, having administrative approval authority for certain permits and requests, having a development review fee schedule and a consolidated fee schedule across the board that's easily accessible, considering different payment methods. One of these, for example, is, you know, explore all types of payment, including credit cards, right? You know, we've looked into credit cards and a few times, and we still haven't determined, just doesn't make quite good sense for our planning and zoning department yet, but it's something we can always, you know, relook to in the future. Access to information, that's very important, and project tracking methods. So you still see we have quite a bit of work to do on the development review side of things. Boards and commissions, we are essentially almost done there. As I mentioned, we have a recruiting and appointment process. We've set expectations and skill sets. We do boards orientation. We have bylaws that we already had beforehand. An annual planning commission report, which the planning commission receives from the zoning administrator every year. Training strategy, which we're going to be working on, and having joint meetings. This year, we already had a joint ZBA and planning commission meeting. Last year, we had a joint DEA council planning commission meeting at Holy Childhood Hall there to talk about some economic development issues. So again, those are best practices, that you have more boards talking to each other about what's going on in the city and collaborating on some of these different things. So, and finally, economic development. These are things that we still have yet to work on. So working on economic development strategy, incentives policies, and a marketing plan, which you have in your package today. So when it comes to the zoning code update, the Plan Commission had proposed the zoning code changes on its own, meaning that these best practices were not discussed at the Planning Commission level. We didn't want that to influence the opinions and recommendations of the Planning Commission, because we wanted it to stay community-driven, community-focused. But the city is required to update the master plan every 6 years. 2014 and in 2022 was the last time we did it. After that updating it, the Planning Commission had made it a goal to update the zoning code, to align it with the master plan, which was their main reason to make it more user-friendly, to organize it better. That process began in the summer of 2022. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we accepted that MEDC grant in May of 2023, again, after determining that the Plan Commission's proposed zoning changes would be aligned with the RRC's best practices, something the council had committed to, and didn't see an issue that the Planning Commission's proposed changes. So one of the topics that people have focused on is housing diversity. In our baseline report, it said we met 2 out of 3 best practices, or the criteria under the housing diversity best practice. Well, when our planner reviewed it, he found actually we had more than 3 by right, and that's because, you know, if you do a control find, for example, of our control F of our zoning code, to do a search of the document, see, you know, what are these, which ones we have, you won't find triplexes, quadplexes, and sixplexes listed. We just don't have those listed, but they're defined under multifamily as anything more than two units in a household. And those are permitted by right in certain districts. So, you know, those are already allowed in the RM district and are still being proposed in the RM district that we, in the proposed zone code. We already have residential above commercial in the commercial district. So the CBD, you're allowed to have residential on the 2nd story by right. And then 2 of the things that are in the current code as special use are accessory dwelling units, known as, what we call them as guest quarters, and there's some stipulations there about who can stay and for how long they can stay. And then also cottage housing, in other words, for our cluster housing that you're allowed by a special type of permission and to do some cluster housing in different districts. So those are the two things that we had by special use, but we had the other things by right. The other one is concentrated development in downtown. And again, the best practice is to have 3 of these options. We already had vertical mixed use development. Outdoor dining was one that's not in our zoning code because it's in our city code. That's something the council approved, I think in 2017, 16 or 18, a little bit before I came here, but it was basically allowing, restaurants to use public sidewalk to have seating, outdoor seating for restaurants. So that's something in our city code. And we also have walk-up windows. We actually went through this during COVID. This was a change we made, first by administrative ordinance, because people didn't want to, necessarily go and be in crowded cafes in summertime. So you had, for example, Birch Tree, before it was Birch Tree, but have a window that you could walk to on the outside. Same thing with Yummies had asked for a window for their ice cream. So this is something we made a change to as part of the administrative ordinance, and the planning commission wanted to keep on doing. So we essentially, in our view, meet those 3 best practices already. Green infrastructure was one that was a little different. For example, best practices have 3, and Jeff, you can maybe expand on this a little bit, but we don't explicitly allow for solar panels in our code by calling them solar panels, but we allow accessory structures. And the planning commission at one point had deemed that solar panels would count as accessory structures because we have these other accessory structures count as others. So that's one thing that we've already allowed in our zoning code. And then our tree plan. So a lot of these, these criteria call for tree planting standards, vegetation standards, so street tree planting standards, parking lot internal landscaping standards. This was part of the tree plan the tree plan that the tree board put together back in 2020 was that we want to see some more vegetation in parking lots when you're talking about new commercial parking lots going into place. So if they don't just want to see one large swath of concrete, you want to have some greenery in there for a variety of reasons. And same thing with street tree planting standards. We have that current city policy and procedures when we plant trees. We have standards must be 25 feet or so from the intersection. Trees must be spaced so many feet away. So that was another thing that was part of our tree plan, as well as our practices that are something that we meet on this code. Sorry, under this best practice. So those are 3 kind of the ones that directly affect zoning. So, we essentially meet them all. I don't really think that there's whatever the planning commission has decided to do in addition to top of that, that was the planning commission looking on its own, what they thought was the best for the community based on the master plan and aligning the zoning code with the master plan. So the RRC, while it's always, it's part of the city council's deal as far as implementing it, there's a lot of planning and zoning and development as part of it. It didn't drive and wasn't a part of the discussions when it came to specific zoning code language, proposed language, as with the recent zoning code update from the planning commission. The RRC don't mandate or create a one-size-fits-all approach. There's so many different criteria under the best practices, and there are multiple options to choose from. And even if you feel as a community that those criteria don't fit your community, you can propose alternatives. So for example, if there was something on that list and, the council said, well, we don't want to do this and that, but we still want to be certified, we can look at a different solution for those. But I don't think we have that problem based on our current evaluation of the best practice criteria. It is a voluntary program and each community carves out its own unique path. So let me just recap here with the process relations to open update. Council committed to the RRC program, determined that achieving and implementing the best practices are in the city's best interest, and this includes zoning and development review best practices. These were discussed at several meetings and are on the city's website. I think we've had at least a dozen meetings where we've discussed RRC or its byproducts, whether it's plans or procedures and practices. We received the MEDC grant 10 months into the zoning code update process. And it made sense because we were already committed to the RRC program, and we were already spending the money on the zoning code update. We already meet most, if not all, the zoning related best practices, even if not all of them are in the zoning code per se, like I mentioned with the outdoor dining, that's in the city code versus the zoning code. Further, the planning commission is making its zoning code recommendations irrespective of the RC best practices, meaning that even if the city was not part of the RC, the planning commission would still be making these recommended changes. So I want to keep on emphasizing that because that's the reality that we're dealing with here. What's next? So I'm assuming we probably have another year of work. There's no timeline, so there's no rush. I mean, like I said, we've been on and off working on this from 2019. Since 2019, some communities do this in a couple years, some take much longer. We recommitted in early 2022, so we're about coming up to 2 years now since we were fully re-engaged. It's a good amount of work for a small town. That's why we're taking our time. There's other important business we have to do, and the good news is just by being engaged in the process, certain MEDC grant money is available to us, so you don't even have to be certified to have grant MEDC money available to the city. So, and that's always good news. Grants are another source for funding. We've heard a lot from residents that, want to keep the taxes low, and one of the ways to fund our other projects are to get grant money. And we have, hit or miss success on it. And Parks knows that, there's a scoring process for grants, and there's a lot of factors that go into grants, but being engaged in the RC program, makes this grant money available to us differently than, for example, DNR grants. So some of the big focus we have left is to clean up some of our development review processes and procedures, and then economic development section of the best practices. So the incentives policy, marketing plan, which we have here, and economic development strategy. So that is my presentation, and I'd be happy to take questions from council, or if you want to open it up to the public.
That's not so scary. Anyone from the public have any questions or comments?
Chip Everest, 4-Beach Drive, just want to know, when we do accept money from MEDC, what kind of conditions they place on us?
So for example, each grant probably is good. Each grant is going to probably be different. For the zoning code update, the grant, the way it was structured was that you get 1/3 upfront, 1/3 for having a draft code, and then 1/3 if the zoning code is updated and it meets the best practices. So for example, if council adopts a zoning code that the MEDC doesn't view meets the RC's best practices, we don't get that third installment. So that was a condition on, for example, I mean, there's more to the grant, but that's, one of the financial, conditions to it. Different grant agreements for different projects would have different stipulations and conditions. So, I mean, I would be a case by case situation. One of the situations, we had a comment, I think, at one of the planning commission's meeting about why we rejected the Harbor Master building grant from the DNR, the Waterways Commission. And it wasn't because, we might lose a few slips. It was because there was a condition in that agreement that said that if we don't necessarily follow the grant terms, we potentially could lose the whole marina to the state and the Harbor Master building. So we tried to get that condition out of that grant, and the state said no. So then we said, well, we're not going to accept it. So what we did, is now, we asked for those agreements beforehand, before we apply for a grant, if they have them available. So we know what the agreement is going to say before we determine whether or not it's going to be worth us applying for the grant. So we don't make that decision of, oh, we got this grant award, we put all this work into the grant, and now we're stuck rejecting that. So it's important. Thanks, Chip.
Anyone else?
You have a couple of hands raised on Zoom. Maureen Penny?
Yeah, is this time for questions only, or is it time for public comment, please?
She's talking or not?
I am speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Is this time for public comment, or are we just taking questions at this point?
Public comment.
Okay. I have some concerns. Victor, our city staffer, started his job May 1st of 2019. 13 work days later, At the May 20th City Council meeting, Victor is an expert on RRC and states that the Michigan Development Corporation requires RRC certification for funding. He continues to deny that RRC is for funding. Also, upon starting his job, he is quoted as saying, "I am looking forward to increasing communications with residents through different mediums." For 2.5 years, we have not heard updates at city council meetings, nor does he mention it on his own city manager report. There's an RRC committee that meets monthly, yet there is no published agendas, meeting minutes, or committee member listings. In a special note, Friday's RRC meeting has been canceled. This is Victor's repeated pattern, folks. He hides things, gets called out, then scurries to make it look like he is helping the citizens. 3 clear examples. RRC hasn't been updated to city council in 2.5 years, and here we are tonight. Victor has never reported anything about RRC in his monthly newsletters, but the most recent March newsletter, he's changed his format and he mentions RRC and the rezoning. Thirdly, even tonight, he continues to emphasize repeatedly that RRC has nothing to do with the zoning, yet he can't provide evidence. I asked for it, and Victor said to FOIA it. Let me close with another quote from Victor when he started his job. It can be fact checked because it's there. Quote, unquote, "I would really love to increase communication and input from residents. I view local government as a people-driven entity, and the more the people get involved and the more input they give us, I think we'll do our jobs better. They need to hold us accountable and understand there's a process sometimes to get things done, but that we are here for them and that we just want them to know they can come to us at any time." So yes, Victor, Mayor Bagheera, and City Council, we are holding you accountable. If RRC is such a positive thing, why are we not celebrating it versus hiding it? Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Carter Williams.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Got a little bit of bad cold. Several people have given me feedback on confusion. And I thought I just might highlight it tonight because it maybe represents the frustration they have. A few points, one which covered we are not doing RRC. The MEDC does or does not have any influence. The grant specifically says full portion of the grant won't be provided unless MEDC accepts our zoning changes. So I'm assuming at some level there's coordination going on there, which may all be good, but really there's no idea on what that is. Now, what has happened in this process is that changes have been made and people have said, why are the changes? So people are under the impression that the changes in the master plan must be incorporated in the zoning. I think I even heard that tonight. That's not the law. If anybody has not read the law on master plan versus zoning, it's in the state law. It guides, it influences, but the specific decision on zoning is a deliberative process, just like you would do a ZBA. When you change the zoning, it's the same legal concept. And you need to understand this particular impact on the property, or you get sued for capricious and arbitrary decisions. And it's the same body of law. So the zoning decisions that are being made are bouncing around in a way that is terribly confusing. You know, in our area on Bay Street, we're all relatively sharp people and understand how to read contracts. We are lost as to what's the motivation for the particular changes, and can't get that answer other than it's the master plan, and the master plan has no legal standing in the conversation. So the right answer is, this is why we made the change. As Tim Patton asked, this is who made the change. The final point is RRC is done for many reasons. Anybody who's seen development anywhere is aware of that change. And most certainly it attracts outside investors. Ask any investor. In Harbor Springs, we have one of the largest private equity investors in the world. In 1 year, they upgraded and redeveloped 600,000 homes. Absolutely, it may be a lot of reasons to do this, but realize that the decision of taking what used to have to go through planning commission and migrating it to the code will not be slowed down by any local effort. Someone could easily come in and buy 400 homes, 40 homes at a time, and it's a no-brainer. So the implications of these things have impact, and there are people in the community that understand that impact because it's their job to develop elsewhere. So I'd appreciate that we're a little lost, even though there's been a lot of communication and we're relatively smart folks. And the communication process has really stumbled here, unfortunately, and it's a shame, but it really needs to get the communication up so that we understand why the decisions are being made.
Williams, can you wrap it up? You're over your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Patrick Kenny.
Okay, I'm going to reiterate my wife's comment to start with, which is Victor showed up in our town May of 2019. He raised this issue from the moment he started, and he brought it to the very first. I mean, this is all factual information. It's all out there. The very first city council meeting, at which point Matt and city council moved forward on his recommendation. I want to point to the fact that in your presentation, you said that dilapidated houses are removed and rebuilt, quote unquote. Tell me, I know of one, but tell me where that otherwise exists. The one that I know of is on Bay Street. It's owned by city councilwoman Rondell and her husband Mark, and they have been part of this underpinning of this plan since day one. No question about it. There are no vacant buildings, no vacant commercial buildings that need to be replaced. You talked about Charlevoix, Petoskey, and Traverse City as being comparatives. Who wants to be those cities? Why don't we look to be our own? Why don't we look to be our own idyllic town that we are? Why would you look to the competition and suggest that we want to be just like them? That's ridiculous. You point to Boyne City, you point to Grand Haven. Tell me, what is their average tax base? There's no question that our average tax base is much higher. You say that you want to keep taxes low. Are you kidding me? That is absolutely not the case. I just got a raise in my own property taxes. We've had our property for over 37 years, and we have continued to pay some of the highest tax rates in the state. So that's ridiculous. So, and Matt Bagara, I'm going to call you out because you need to get control of this leadership. Otherwise, step aside. You have otherwise abrogated your entire role on an ongoing basis. So that's my comments, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.
Linda Rockwitz, 519 East Third Street. I couldn't disagree more with the most recent comments. We have dedicated people who are trying hard to run our city, and lots of what was said, I think, is not actually factual. We don't have the highest tax rate base anywhere. Everybody's going to get a tax increase this year because the cost of living went up. I'm just appalled at those comments.
Thank you. Anybody else?
We do have Robin Johnson online. Okay. All right, Robin Johnson.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. I want to, I appreciate the earlier gentleman who spoke giving the sales pitch on the RRC. I just don't believe that putting lipstick on a pig is anything but putting lipstick on a pig. There's still a pig. Harbor Springs does not need to be under the thumb of Lansing. Local residents in Harbor Springs know what's best for this town. We don't need some faceless, nameless person who runs an RRC telling us how things should be. Following these standards that are in there are just puts us on the path to look just like every other city. One size fits all. Harbor Springs would lose its priceless uniqueness that it's so well known for. 2 years ago, you all compared Harbor Springs to Charlevoix and Petoskey when you were trying to sell us the residents on paid parking. And I hope you learned from that we don't want to be like those cities. I feel like any of these changes to zoning is just a slippery slope. We follow these guidelines, and then how long until they tell us that we have to do something else to remain within those guidelines? And they're just going to continue chipping away at Harbor Springs' individuality. It's a slippery slope for making ADUs the standard to loosening the standard to something less appealing that's more liberal in what they're allowed to put on there. Once you put yourself under the thumb of Lansing, there is no going back. You're already enjoying the money you're getting for starting the process. I imagine that the city's already spent in their own minds the rest of the money when they complete it. We don't need it. We don't need the state's money by following this. And that's it. Thank you.
Anyway.
Good evening. I see my hand up there looks dark. I think it's reflecting my tan. So, appreciate the presentation, and very much appreciate the overview of best practices, which I think everyone in the audience and certainly the council understands and appreciates and wants to embrace best practices. One thing I didn't hear was anything around ethics and conflict of interest that was part of best practices related to the RRC. And if not there, as we pursue how we want to approach planning for the city and any potential modifications to zoning, whether there's consideration for us to update our ethics and our conflict of interest policy. I've searched to see what is available. In the charter, there is a very cursory and not in depth and frankly not a best practice that's reflected in the charter. And I heard an overview at the beginning of the planning commission meeting last week on a description of conflict of interest, which to me was not appropriate. That I think we need to have further discussions, and hopefully as we go forward, we can embrace what truly is a best practice related to ethics and conflict of interest.
You?
Dan Mulder, 372 West Summit. I have a question for Victor. Am I missing something, or do we not get to pick and choose what makes sense for our city? We don't have to embrace everything that is put out there by RRC. We do what makes sense, like the best practices on boards and commissions and public outreach. I think you've made huge strides in that. I just don't get what the big deal is, honestly. It seems like we can say no to anything we want to say no to, right? And do we intend to? I would ask council this, like, do you have any problem with saying no, that something that's recommended in our RRC, it doesn't make sense?
I don't have a problem with it. It doesn't fit Harbor Springs. Shouldn't be there.
What else?
Nate Graham, 7973 South Pleasant View Road. Grateful to have this meeting again tonight. You guys have gone through several meetings several times and more than several nights for several hours. Thank you for coming back again. I appreciate you what you're doing. I think that was helpful for everybody, especially online, especially as I've heard from hundreds of people recently just how concerned they are about rapid change. And what I'm grateful to hear tonight is that we are all on the same page. That everybody loves her. I've seen everybody from every different walk and facet of town get exacerbated over this. And it's sad to see not only that much confusion, but that much instability through it. I greatly look forward to selling Harbor Springs however we can for the next 50 years, but want to keep that character and greatly appreciate that comment. I hope however we can get to a point that whether it's more Q&As like this or more open like this, I think everybody should appreciate it. So thank you guys for doing this again, and thank you guys for all being here. Love it. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
There's no other public, oh, there's right
Okay, talk again, Chip Everest, 4 Beach Drive. Appreciate the comments a lot as well. And I'm sorry about the personal attacks on everybody. That's not helpful in any way. I do concur with Mr. Williams' concern about big money coming in here and buying property. And I think we need to be just as vigilant as we possibly can, protect ourselves. I mean, the problem with Harbor Springs, in my opinion, is that, you know, the property values are so high, we're pushing out our middle class. And I think if we allow developers and big money to come in here and buy property like that, it'll only make that worse. And I'm not convinced that we've thought that through as thoroughly as we should have. And I too don't want to see the town change in any way. So thanks.
Hi, Sharon Ockfield. I live in Birchwood. I'm really concerned about the ag neighborhood that's in the middle of town. And I'm sort of concerned about putting an overlay on the west side of town for ag.
Well, I want to save this for the zoning.
Oh, is that?
That's coming out next. There's a zone.
Different problem. Thank you. Anyone else on the RRC?
But last thing on RRC, is there a way to be able to table this or continue to have these conversations throughout the next several weeks, as this needs to be pushed through now versus being able to have everybody's opinion? I know that's the ongoing thing, but transparency there.
Well, we aren't approving anything tonight. We're just getting educated.
The marketing plan.
The marketing.
I have another question too. Is there a way to find some mechanisms of control so we don't have the big developers come in and do things that are out of keeping with our beautiful town? Is that something we can look into? Would it be under RRC or would it, we don't really have an economic development department. Like, how would that be looked into?
Don't think you can stop people from selling their property. I mean, they aren't gonna buy it if it's not for sale. Guess if they wanna come in and offer more money than property's worth, then that's an option, but I can't see everyone on Bay Street selling off their property. If they all love Harbor Springs so much, they probably won't sell their property.
Is there something we can do with zoning though?
I think it's the RRC is not. Doesn't do. That's
Not.
not.
Yeah, the RRC.
It's not RRC.
So
It's there.
it's an individual's choice what they do with their property. They want to sell it to a developer, that's their motivation. I don't think legally or we can do anything on our end.
A good example is on Main Street, there's a lot of one-story buildings and a developer can come in right now and propose to purchase those buildings and make them two-story buildings. If the ROI, return on investment, makes sense. So we haven't seen a lot of that going on. So, I mean, there's plenty of opportunities for developers right now to purchase a lot of land, to do a lot of development under the current zoning code. But I don't think that's a RRC related focus of this. We do have another comment on Zoom from James Kenny. James?
Yeah, I appreciate Dana kind of taking the lead here and asking some questions, and kind of that's something that we've always hoped to do in these meetings. So I appreciate Dana's leadership there and starting this. So in that spirit, I just had two questions. My understanding is with the RRC is that it is in fact an all or nothing process. And so what is the process then if there's something that the city doesn't like, and how would you reject that? And then secondly, I think given the mayor's previous endorsement and his vote to approve this, it would be great to understand his rationale behind the decision to support this and kind of his thinking, and what homework and due diligence specifically have you done to vet this? Thank you.
We have Allison Larson.
Hi, good evening. I would just like to make a statement that my husband and I are both against the RRC being involved in Harbor Springs. We do not think it is inappropriate. It will bring urbanization to our quaint, lovely town, and it's not a fit for our town that is not an impoverished city. Thank you.
All right, council. So we have, if you have any questions about the RRC for me, we also have the marketing plan to review.
Move on to the marketing plan.
Questions about it? The overview I gave earlier. Seven pages. 6 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, listing the community assets, listing the local stakeholders and regional stakeholders. We also have, I guess, branding with our logo. Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah, Rich.
So I created the marketing plan for the RRC, and I worked with Pablo from MEDC to create it. It's really great because it gives examples from other communities you can kind of base yours off of. But it's also great because some marketing plans, if you go on, the examples are 26 pages long. Obviously, we don't need marketing plans 26 pages long. This is about 7 pages long. And when I uploaded it, their exact comment was, it's simple, but it fits. And that's a perfect example of every community is different in this process. Ours is this is what we do. It doesn't say what we're gonna do in the future necessarily. It kind of leaves it a little open to create what we want it to be. But it fit, even though it was very simple and it fit our community. Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward. Everything we've been doing.
I was gonna say that doing is working with the partners we already work with. We put a new logo in the last few years. That's mildly different.
Well, and that's part of the marketing too, is, you know, the police department, they use our logo and put Harbor
Right.
Springs Police on it. Harbor Springs use our logo, put Harbor Springs Parks on it. We're trying to stick with same colors and themes throughout the city as part of the branding, you know, so.
Public comment on the marketing plan? Any discussion at the table?
I think it's good. I mean, like Rachel said, it's simple. It's what we're already doing.
Right.
It's just making it formalized.
Absolutely. I think, you know, looking at the overall messaging, the three, A, B, and C, Harbor Springs has a place for everyone. Harbor Springs is a place to raise your family. Come locate in Harbor Springs for your business opportunity. I don't see how any of that is negative or can be argued against. The actions that follow, I think, are very appropriate. many of them we are doing. There's certainly points of pride. So I think it's a good plan.
No motion. Is
Is
that where we are? Are you guys good? I'll make a motion that we accept the marketing plan as written for the RFC.
Second.
We can do it all in favor of this one. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the last presentation, which we are in our third presentation. Is a presentation, well, a status code update from the planning commission on zoning code update. And I do want to, before I pass it over to Bill Mulder, to just give you a status update on the zoning code. And I've heard this, I wrote this on Friday, and I heard this come up a couple times today about property values, and then our process for both RC and the planning commission zoning code update being under the radar, being rushed and not communicated. So I'm gonna touch on both of those things right now. Your tax values are capped when you purchase your house. So there are only really three ways your property tax is increased. One is inflationary rate. We don't set that, we don't control that at the city, so that's set by the state. Another thing that can increase your property taxes or your taxable value is your, if you do any kind of construction on your home or property. So you add a porch, you add a garage, that's gonna increase your taxable value. And finally, the other way is increase via millage rate. And for the city of Harbor Springs, the only way we can increase the millage rate is by vote of the public. So the public has to, the residents, voters have to vote to increase the millage rate. So really, those are the only three ways your taxable value will increase. Your taxable value is when you purchased your house, whether it was 1990, 2000, that's when your taxable value is capped. So aside from those inflationary costs, and that's from the city perspective, what the county, the schools do for, millages or anything, but from our perspective, we cannot raise the millage rate for your city, the taxes that the city collects. So for most people on any given year, your increase in taxes is related to your inflationary rate. Jeff, I don't know how many zoning permits you see for home improvements, but it's probably a dozen or two a year. So it's not a majority of the people, the residents in town. And I'm speaking, I do get my information and my knowledge about assessing from our assessor here. So I'm hoping I'm doing a good job. So your assessed value is something different. That's sometimes also referred to as your property value, and it's not the same as your taxable value. If, as I mentioned, if you bought your house in 2010, its assessed value may have doubled or tripled since then, compared to your taxable value. But you're not taxed on that assessed value. You're only taxed on the taxable value from when you purchased your house, or for any increases in construction or inflationary rates. So from 2022 to 2023, on average, house costs, assessed values have gone up by 22%. By 20%. And from 2023 to 2024, it's gone up by 22%. Those are property values. Those are being, without the zoning code changes, those are the property value increases we're seeing. And I think that's something that we all recognize is it can be hard on people, but to iterate the other side of that coin is people are not being taxed on that assessed value. They're being taxed on the rate when they purchase their home. So, and of course, inflationary rates, which we don't control. So I think it's important to make that distinction, and voters know that this zoning code update has nothing to do with increasing taxes, because I got a few calls about that saying this zoning code is going to increase the tax rate. We can't increase the tax rate at the city without a vote of the people. And I also want people to understand the assessed value versus taxable value. They're two different things, and your assessed value will go up a lot. You'll see your assessment change notices, and you'll see those have increased a lot. So whoever purchased your house from you, they're going to be likely paying a substantially higher tax rate on their house if they buy it now. The second question is, this is related to both the RC process and the Planning Commission zoning code update, but I'll reference it with regards to the zoning code update. Since we began our monthly newsletter in September of 2022, which was again a byproduct of our participation plan, which was a byproduct of the RC process, we created that newsletter. We discussed or mentioned the zoning code in 16 out of 19 newsletters. That this process was going on, that the planning commission was reviewing it, that it was happening. So if we have about 220 people now subscribed to our newsletter. That's one way to get that information. It's been in almost in every single newsletter that we've put out. So that we're under the radar, that's kind of misleading. That we've not been communicating, I think that's kind of misleading. The first substantial zoning code discussion took place in the summer of 2022 at the July 21 Planning Commission meeting. In that packet that was distributed out there, a list of all the proposed suggested changes that the Planning Commission wanted to talk about was in there, including ADUs, smaller lot sizes, smaller setbacks, multi-family housing, vegetation, more charts and tables, more illustrations, mixed-use regulations, stormwater, renewable energy, reduction of parking requirements, definitions, et cetera. Everything that you basically see in the code today and the proposed changes was discussed at that first meeting. We even had a flag lots discussion several months later. We had specific conversations on ADUs, flag lots, on collapsing districts. There's all these conversations have happened at Planning Commission level. Since that first meeting, the Planning Commission has had 17 meetings on the zoning code update. In 13 of those meetings, there were draft versions of the code or sections of the codes provided to the Planning Commission packets. These were placed on the website, social media, sent to people on our email list, posted at physical locations. The packets were also posted on the website. People had access to this. The public has a right to ability to comment, participate at all of these meetings in person or via Zoom. So if you attended all 17 meetings, you had 3 minutes at each meeting, you had almost an hour to comment on these zoning code updates. And there were meetings, and I heard this too, that, we're doing this in the winter. There's summer meetings in 2022, summer meetings in 2023. And also in October of 2023, the council had 3 open house meetings. Sorry, not this council, the Planning Commission had 3 open house meetings outside of the normal Planning Commission meeting dates and times. And this was noticed in the newspaper, as well as on other mediums. And Emmett County newspaper has written at least 8 articles. Emmett County newspapers, Harbor Light, Petoskey News Review has written at least 8 articles on the zoning code update since 2022. I don't think there's a lack of communication going on here. We've been very communicative. Since I started here, there's this accusation that not being transparent and not communicating. We didn't have a newsletter before I came here. We didn't have a public participation plan. We didn't have an ability to sign up for email access to what's going on at our meetings. We didn't post our agendas at the IGA or the Harbor Springs Market or the post office. We didn't have YouTube, Zoom participation. There's a lot of things we didn't have. So I think that this idea that, we have not been communicating to the public about what's going on, is just not based on any fact. As far as the specific zoning code update, I do understand there's a lot of people who are learning of these just in the past month or month and a half, but that's not because of our lack of communication. I also think it's just a part of regular local government. It's just a reality we face, and most people don't really come out until the final decision is about to be made. They usually don't. It's just a kind of a reality, and it happens in all local governments around the country, around the state, and it's just something we deal with on a regular basis. But there's been plenty of opportunities to participate. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass it over to Chair Mulder to give a brief status update on the zoning code.
All right, thanks, Victor. And that's purpose. This is a very brief status update. And not to get into the details, but just to tell you where the Planning Commission is and make sure everybody's on board. So here's where we are. At our last meeting, February 22nd, we finalized the major aspects of the recommended zoning that we think will be sending to you at some point shortly in the future. And everything was pretty well locked down, except for some residents from the transitional residential district on Bay Street. Believe that they had a case that they wanted to make to us about a different way to handle their property. And we decided that there was enough question that it was worthwhile to have another special meeting. We're going to do that Thursday night and hear from those residents about what they believe the treatment in the new scheme ought to be. And I have no idea what will come of that, but we thought it was worthwhile hearing about that. And City staff is gonna analyze different options and tell us about that, and then planning commission will decide something. And if planning commission is satisfied with all aspects at that time, they could decide to vote and send the proposed ordinance as a whole on to city council, or not. If we're not completely satisfied, we're not gonna vote. And if and when the ordinance is sent to city council, you control the process. So if people have concerns about more communication, the speed, the timing, whatever, it's totally in your hands to decide how to proceed on that. And I'll tell you at the end how planning commission could support in the process. And we've seen this 100 times, and that's why we're doing it. And let's not lose sight of the fact that we wanted to be proactive. Planning commission has done as much research as we can about what the future is going to hold for our residents. And we think we have a recommendation that helps support what people are going to want and need in the future. So that's the key thing I wanted to pass on to you tonight. Go ahead, Victor. And so these are, we've shown this slide at every meeting. These are the resources that the planning commission has used. And this one, the zoning reform toolkit, is one of the main things that we followed from the very beginning. We had a seminar on it for planning commission, ZBA, and city council members, actually. So this is free online. You can take a look at it from the American Planning Association. And you'll see a lot of the ideas in there look familiar because there's only so many ideas in the housing space and in the zoning world. So there's a lot of overlap. The other one that was a big influence was AARP, Making Room, Housing for a Changing America. And they've talked a lot about what they believe older residents are going to want and done a lot of research. And so that was a big influence for us too, in light of the fact that we are pretty darn old. Okay. So having boiled down the just the very top aspects of the zoning recommendation that we're likely going to bring to you, here it is. This is what it's all about. First one is to reorganize, streamline, and clarify the code itself. People seem pretty solid with that. Reduce the number of zoning districts from 17 to 9 conceptually. People are on board with that. 17 sounded like a crazy number to have to administer. There's a little bit of give and take about exactly what those districts, want to be. The next one is about lots, and we're proposing to reduce the minimum lot width from 65 feet, 80, and 100 feet. Those are our three most common lot widths, down to 52, modeled on the West 3rd and West 4th Street neighborhoods. Allow flag lots, and everything would have to meet the minimum lot requirements when you created a flag lot. In the very few cases we think that could happen. Reduce the minimum dwelling size from 864 at present down to 560. That sounds alarming on the surface. It did to me in the beginning. We're going to talk a lot more about this stuff. I would tell you that probably doesn't even matter if it was 1,000 feet for all it. But we'll come back to that. And then next three things are modify our existing guest quarters regulations to become ADUs, where a guest could stay, your guest could stay for more than 21 consecutive days. That would be a by right use, and it could be rented long-term, but not short-term. And then finally, expand where duplexes could exist in certain districts and permit triplexes as well with special land use. So that's the meat of it. And that's what you'll hear a whole lot more about in the near future. Here's a refresher on the proposed zoning map. That's the real meat. That's the nuts and bolts of what's being proposed. And then finally, I just want to remind people with property in associations, like the landowners associations, homeowners associations, condo associations, all the stuff probably doesn't apply to you. Way more restrictive covenants than any kind of an association than in the regular vanilla city zoning. All right. City Council, when this comes to you, Planning Commission would be pleased to continue to support the public dialogue process. We could have, at your command, we could have big meetings, small meetings, workshops. We could have coffee and zoning. We could have cocktails and zoning. We You can have yoga and zoning, whatever you want. So just let us know what the flavor is. We can talk about this stuff all day long in any level of detail, and can't wait to do that.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Up to public comment.
No. Public comment on Bill's little presentation on zoning.
Yeah, you gotta comment.
Karen, this is your chance.
Oh, yes.
Start it off.
So, to digress, I have an issue
State your
about, any kind of precedence. Oh,
Check your name.
I'm sorry, if you could just state your name for the record.
Karen
please.
Lockfield.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, live in Birchwood. I have an issue about precedence, of removing an ag area from a township, a town, a city. And it goes along with the idea that maybe people don't even know that that may be happening to their land. Whether it's the little place near Ottawa and Arbor Street, I guess that one has just completely been taken out. But then putting an overlay over there by the Bluff Gardens, I'm assuming that's being done so you could just build a bunch of houses there as well. So I'd like to understand more, and we can get into it at another time about that. Bill is he's a really good mediator. In the presentation that he just gave, the audience, the citizens that came to the meetings, the last two meetings, there were problems with multi-houses. There were problems with ACUs. There were problems with allowing businesses to be in the residential areas. There were problems with reducing from 800 to 560 square feet. And when you want to talk about 1,000 square feet, the little cottage company houses, that's 900 square feet, 2 stories. And so if you were old and couldn't walk up the stairs, and that was going to be your own little house, there isn't a room for a suitcase in 450 square feet. So I don't know if it's the usual course of the way it's done, that planning and zoning gives you all the problems. But I think there's going to be a whole bunch of them. And I think the idea of having these small get-togethers, because these citizens absolutely don't know what's going on. That's what we've sort of gathered. And so we did a petition for everyone to sign to try to slow everything down and try to put a, if we could be RRC engaged, maybe that would be the least impactful. I understand why you want to have a wheel that works when you try to do something this complicated. Thank you.
Anybody else?
We do have Carter Williams on Zoom. Carter?
I just want to follow up for a moment on a couple comments about development, and that still is a concern. So it's really not the job of the people on Bay Street to slow the development in Harbor Springs. I think that the thing I would appreciate better understanding is whether we want to develop a lot or a little. And my particular concern is a neighbor would make a choice and I would have a 3-story wall-to-wall building next to me. I think others have that similar concern, and and even some of these decisions and the zoning that affects that has only recently been modified in the zoning and made apparent. So it's been challenging to have kept up with something that's not actually there until recently. So, but the broader issue is, do we want to develop a lot or a little? No, little buildings haven't been changed on Main Street because a developer wants to do 40 buildings, not one. And so as we move to this, I'm telling you, as an investor and knowing investors, someone will say, yeah, we can come in and over the next 5 years, do 100 developments like we did in Bay Harbor. And we can just roll through here and invest the time to do it. That's how they think. And once we make these changes, there's nothing. I don't think anybody here can say that those changes could be stopped. The final point a little bit, I don't know why Victor brought up the concept of taxes in terms of just that. If we have 40 more units downtown, there is physical infrastructure that has to be put in. And it's not clear that we've looked through that to understand what that physical infrastructure cost would be and what the implication of that would be. So development is gonna come fast or slow, depending on the decision on this zoning.
Thanks, Carter.
Thank you.
Nope. Okay, we do got Miranda Miller. Miranda? Miranda, if you can unmute yourself. Ask you to unmute.
Brenda.
Right, ever blocked. Okay. That's a joke.
All right.
Yeah. You ever unmute? Let
You
her
want me to move
talk.
on? Yeah, I can move on to the city manager's report and if she goes back on. Couple updates here. I believe the harbor master building bid document should be ready by the end of this month for hopefully a spring bid letting. We were just did some boring samples, engineer did for that, just to reconfirm some things. So I think we should have that soon. I checked with Mark a couple weeks ago, Mark Bidet. The Judd Hill retaining wall replacement project is probably going to begin late March. It could take up to 2 months, 6 to 8 weeks is generally what we've discussed. We will send out notices to nearby property owners. Everyone should be prepared to seek an alternate route to downtown or uptown, depending on what route you take. Street sweeper was ordered, should arrive in early summer, which is great news. And then we did have a broken water main on 3rd Street. We did had to send in some water samples to make sure there was no contamination, but before we lifted the boil advisory. Those all came back clear. Some just social media and updates. We do have about 240 people now on our email notices. They have about a 70% open rate. We do use text my gov messages communication for bigger things, water main breaks, road closures, et cetera. We do have 80 people signed up for that. So I encourage that this is not something we use to update people on meetings, but it's more for events, road closures, projects, emergencies. Social media, we do have 2,300 followers so we do have a lot of people on Facebook following us, quite a bit of engagement. We also do use our Instagram photo page for marketing the town's, events going on, or pictures of our community. Of course, YouTube, we had a lot of views in the past month, and I suspect most of that was due to the planning commission meetings. The planning commission did have 3 meetings in February. 2 of them were public hearings. The Parks Board also held 2 meetings in February, and one was a special meeting just to learn about surveying methods and discuss surveying, what they were discussing for potentially surveying residents who use certain parks, as well as from the township and from the cities. I did have a couple webinars, ICMA webinars that I did from my office. One was on streamlining municipal processes, another was on budgeting practices, just to keep up to date with current trends. We'd have a regular CCE 911 regular board meeting, a wellhead protection plan committee meeting. City received a grant. We have to update our wellhead protection plan every so often, and we have a grant that we're working on to update that plan with an engineering firm. And then we did meet with Emmett County Recycling to discuss renewal of the curbside recycling and city limits. That expires this September, so probably this spring, you'll see us come back with a updated contract or agreement with Emmett County Recycling. So any questions from the council on city manager report? That's what I have.
Good. Okay, Miranda, one more chance. Miranda.
One more chance, Miranda. I am clicking on it. Yes, I am. If you want to come here and click it, you can. All right.
Yeah, we tried. Okay, we'll do our own business. Yeah. Sure. All right. Yeah.